This is a gunting. It is something that anyone who practices Filipino martial arts would come to know and use across the globe. It is characteristic for its forward curving claw-like blade. But what if I told you that this sword is but a modern version of the centuries of iteration of Ginunting swords? Join me today as we explore how this sword came into being, starting from its historical and ethnographic roots toward its modern conception. We begin tracing roots of the Ginunting sword to Panay Island. It began not as a sword of its own, but a variation of the Talibong sword. You see the Talibong swords of Panay come in different tip shapes. The Ginunting is but a style of a Talibong with a downward facing tip. This style of tip is also commonly referred to as a kinampit. A variation of this tip is much rounder rather than straight. In some cases, the rounder tip has a sharp and false edge. The cutting edge is straighter, lacking any belly. This is an indication that the Ginunting sword is a chopper kind of sword. We now come to Bicol region of southern Luzon. They also have a Ginunting sword, but it looked drastically different to the one you'd expect in Panay Island. There, the cutting edge cants forward or has a cutting belly. Contrary to Panay Ginuntings, Bicol Ginuntings would allow for slicing action other than chopping. The tip shape is also different as it bears a large clip point tip. The tip also faces slightly upward rather than downward. Interestingly enough, the Bicol region also has another sword that looks just like a Ginunting would look like. It is called a Simrampalok. It has a rounder downward facing tip and a blade that widens gradually from the hilt close to the tip. The edge of the sword would either go straight or slightly canting forward. Though it's a separate sword to a Ginunting, it would look like closer to a modern Ginunting. Then came the 1970s, and the current head of the Pakitik Tertia Kali, or PTK, Leo Gahe, came to Negros Island to collaborate with a sword maker named Marshal Guarino to create a martial arts signature weapon. Leo Gahe chose the Ginunting, but included parameters to make the sword more effective in combat efficiency while keeping its capacity to be used secondarily as a tool. Taking this in mind, Marshal Guarino would formulate a modern Ginunting sword design. Without a direct explanation as to how the modern Ginunting sword was designed, we can only speculate as using two previous Ginunting swords from Panay and Bicol. Guarino took the tip shape of the Panay Ginunting with a rounder tip and sharpened false edged. Keeping this tip design, he makes the blade cant forward with a subtle curve. The cutting edge follows the subtle curve of the spine, making the sword look like a long claw. Both Panay and Bicol Ginunting swords have ethnographic handle designs. To create an effective sword handle, Guarino designed a handle with finger grooves. To add additional grip retention, he also designed a blocky pommel swell that keeps the pinky of the user in place. Though the handle look minimalistic, you can faintly see the Leviathan's gaping mouth shaped into the pommel end. To include handle protection, he also included metal knuckle guards that would cover the user's fingers. From Negros Island, the modern Ginunting sword is born as the signature weapon of PTK practitioners. Considering that the art is practiced by the Philippine Marines, the military integrated the use of the modern Ginunting in their arsenal. Stories of the military's use of the sword against insurgents are spread out. A soldier named Manuel Prado made the Ginunting popular in the military for his usage of the sword when he had to confront insurgents in the forest and mountains in melee combat when they run out of ammunition. The sword proved to be an effective combat sword and survival tool in the Philippine wilderness. So much so that the same guy started a business of forging the Ginunting to his fellow soldiers. Soon enough, more soldiers desired the sword as their personal tool of choice for survival. The popularity of the sword grew so much that it spreads internationally, especially in the United States. The sword has also been created with variations from the standard Ginunting. This piece right here is owned by Michael Janich, which has a wider tip with a sharpened false edge. Dogmark Haida also has his Cortada sword, an enlarged version of the knife of the same name, which was also directly inspired from the Ginunting. All of these swords are but the next iterations of the modern Ginunting. Today there's a lot of sellers of the modernized Ginunting sword. In the US, there's traditional Filipino weapons. In the Philippines, the main contenders would be Top Prado blades and Kalahi custom blades. If you do want something close to the original, you might get one from the city of Silay in Negros Island. Whether you prefer the traditional Ginunting swords of Panay or Bicol, the Ginuntings and their modern iterations will be a mainstay in Filipino martial arts. There is no denying of the sword's awesome capability of being a combat sword and a survivalist tool in the jungle. Almost any collector of Filipino swords and practitioner of the martial arts would have a Ginunting sword in their collection. This would not be the last I can introduce of history of a weapon in the Philippines. Until then, I bid you farewell.